going, everyone? Today I am in the Turbo X, and I figured I would talk about all of the mods that have been done to the car, because I've gotten a few questions asking, just as I do more mods, like what do you have done to it, etc, etc. So I figured I'd make a video just basically listing off everything that both I've done to the car and previous owners have done to the car. So I want to start off by saying that I bought this car back in June and had it delivered to me here in Phoenix in July. I bought the car in Massachusetts and had it shipped out to me, and when I bought it, it really didn't have a whole lot done to it. Really the biggest thing that I was most excited about was it had a rear muffler delete. So with the rear muffler delete, it was pretty loud on cold starts, but besides that, it was really quiet. When I got on it, I mean, you could hear it, but it wasn't loud. And not to say that I wanted something that was loud and obnoxious, because I mean, honestly, now the car isn't loud and obnoxious, but I wanted something that when I got on it, I could hear it more, and I could really, you know, hear the turbo and hear everything just working, if that makes sense. Besides that muffler delete, it had a genuine Saab short shifter. Now, I would love to tell you guys the difference that this makes, but unfortunately, since this was on the car when I bought it, I can't really give you a before and after. But I'll just say that I love how the shifter feels. I love this transmission. This 6-speed is really nice. It's very smooth. Besides that, it had a couple other genuine Saab mods. It had a shifter cable reinforcement and some torque mount inserts, I believe. Nothing really major, like I said. And then, of course, it had a JZW Stage 1 tune. Alright guys, so a couple things I want to mention here. First off, I don't know why the audio in this clip and a couple other clips throughout this video are pretty poor. I apologize for that. And second off, I totally forgot to mention my map tune coilovers. These were on the car when I got it. They're absolutely great. The ride is still really soft, and it still is very daily drivable. They're not super stiff. Of course, you can adjust the stiffness, but because of how low they are, it does mean I have to be careful with certain dips and whatnot to not scrape. But I mean, the car handles amazingly with them. I'm very happy with them overall. So with that being said, let's get back to the video. So shortly after I got the car, you know, I had spent a pretty good amount on the car and having it shipped out here, so I figured, you know, I'm gonna leave it as is for a while. And then Saab Owners Convention came around. I talked to Adam at Euro Parts, and he's like, hey, is there anything you want to do to this car? You know, maybe we can work together, do something. And sure enough, that just kind of started getting the ball rolling, and since then I've done quite a bit of work to it. So I want to start off with the first big mods that I did to it. The first one was the Krona exhaust. So I got both a Krona downpipe and a Krona midpipe for this car. So of course, your normal OEM downpipe has a big fat catalytic converter right behind the turbo. The Krona downpipe doesn't have that. So if you run it without what's called a defouler, which I bought as well, if you guys want to see the whole install, you can check out the video. I'll link it up in the top corner. But basically with that defouler, I don't get a check engine light, so it's perfectly fine. The car thinks it's fine, and let me tell you, it's definitely worth it, both performance-wise and sound-wise. It made quite a big difference, as I'll talk about a bit later, when I took it back to the dyno after going a first time when the car was stock. So I did the Krona downpipe and the Krona midpipe. That was definitely the most difficult thing that I did, just because of how hard the downpipe removal and install was. Any V6 Saab owner that's done this will tell you that it was pretty in-depth, but it's definitely worth it. And let me tell you guys, if you're upgrading this exhaust just for sound and not really for the performance aspect of it, it's well worth it just in that regard too. This thing sounds amazing. I'll go ahead and play a couple clips for you guys now. So after I got the exhaust done, I drove it around for a week or two, and that old JZW tune started to give me some misfires pretty bad when I was really on the car, giving it a lot of throttle. And I can't fully blame JZW for this because this was an East Coast car. This car was tuned for 93 octane. We only get 91 out here in Arizona, so it was not tuned for the same exact octane, so I guess you can fault that for the misfires, but I just wanted to get a different tune on the car. So my buddy Anthony, who is a dealer for MapTune, hooked me up with a MapTune Stage 2 on the car temporarily, and that I don't know, I love it. That's what's still on the car now. I absolutely love the MapTune Stage 2. After my MapTune Stage 2 is when I really got into the DO88 parts on this car. I started with the intercooler and the charge pipes. So the intercooler and charge pipes were a fairly straightforward and easy install. It really only took an afternoon, so I was very happy. It went very smoothly until the end when we were trying to move the radiator a bit to kind of line the radiator and the intercooler up, and we ended up puncturing the radiator, so we had to get a new one of those. But besides that, the install went completely flawlessly. So the intercooler made a big difference. Everything just felt better. That's how I've described it. That's how I initially described it, and that's kind of like the best way that I can describe it, is that throttle response is better, less turbo lag, it feels like it pulls a little bit harder, everything just gets better. When I got to the point when I had the intercooler installed, it was around the time of year when the weather was already starting to cool off. So once summer comes around and the ambient temperature starts to get up to like 110, 115 on the daily, that's when we'll really start to see the difference of this intercooler. But even for now, I mean, I can be driving it for an hour and then get on it and it'll pull just as hard as when I first got in the car. The power doesn't taper off, the car doesn't get heat soaked at all anymore. I just absolutely love this intercooler, and of course it adds some shiny parts to the engine bay and makes it look pretty nice. So after I did the intercooler, I took the car back to the dyno. Now I didn't really mention this at first, but what DO88, Krona, and E-Euro Parts wanted initially was they wanted a baseline test before their mods were on my car, and then a test after, so that way you could see the difference that it made. And if I remember correctly, I should have looked this up before I started recording. I'll put the correct numbers at the bottom of the screen if I'm wrong, but it made for an increase of, I think it was those are wheel numbers, not crank numbers, before and after with the same JZW tune. And then when you factored in the MapTune Stage 2, those numbers were even bigger. So the dyno videos were probably my favorite videos to make, just because I got to see my car on the dyno and see how much power it made. It was a whole lot of fun. But after I took it to the dyno, I took a little bit of time off from modifying the car. And most recently, in fact in the last couple weeks, I did some more work with DO88 and I installed their full intake system on the car. Now, if you guys remember from that video, if you watched it, their intake kit comes in two different parts. The first part is the filter and the shroud around the filter, and then the second part is the part that goes from the filter to the turbo. So the inlet pipe kit, I believe, is what they call it. So I installed both of those on the car, and they made a big difference. I mean, as I talked about in that video, and as DO88 has told me, the more that you modify your car, the bigger the difference your air intake modification is going to make. But my favorite part about the intake is the sound. The amount of turbo noise that you get now, especially when you come off the throttle, the whoosh. It's not like a blow-off valve, it doesn't have a blow-off valve, but it kind of sounds like it does. I absolutely love it. Windows up, windows down, you can hear it just as well. It's just a really cool sound that kind of adds to the already great sound from the Krona exhaust. So there's just a couple other little mods that I've done here and there with the car. One of them is a Van True dash cam, which I had sent to me kind of as a partnership or sponsorship or whatever. And I was a little doubtful at first because it was on the cheap side. I think it's like $60 or $70, but I am absolutely in love with it. It's nice and small. It's smaller than a GoPro, and it's very subtle. It records in 1080 wide angle. You can change a bunch of different settings on it. So I love that dash cam. I've actually, it just comes in handy to have a dash cam, period. But besides that, I also did a eBay roof spoiler install, and that was about a $50 part. That was something I paid for that I actually thought would make the car look better, and I'm fairly happy with it. Is it worth the 50 bucks? I mean, I'd say so. It's, again, it's not my favorite upgrade I've done by any means, but I do think it helps make the car look a little bit more aggressive. So I figure I should talk about what future mods I might have for this car coming. Well, I do have some DO88 radiator and coolant hoses sitting in the garage right now that I have to get on this car here fairly shortly, when I can hopefully have some time to do it. Other than that, I'm thinking maybe the next logical step, if I really want to make more power, is to upgrade the turbo. So maybe a 19T sometime in 2019. I'm not sure. So 19T hopefully sometime in the future. I'm not 100% certain on that. But other than that, bigger injectors, I mean, just kind of the other basic stuff. I mean, it's pretty much got all the bolt-on mods that you can do for it right now. But with that being said, guys, that's gonna wrap up this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and I'll see y'all next time.
Check your body.